Morning, students. So this here is one of the videos that I'll be recording for you to help you to better understand some of these writing techniques so that you can revise this anytime you would like, and so that we can devote a little bit more time in class to writing, and so I can give you feedback a little bit more quickly. So you can take this as a teaser to how post-secondary education will be like, where you're expected to be a bit more independent in terms of listening to lectures online and spend more of the classroom timing working on tutorials. Okay, so this would be a good practice for you and to get you to be more future ready, so to speak. Alright, so as we are preparing for our upcoming term assessment, argumentative writing is one of the genre that you are expected to be familiar with during this period of time. Okay, so to give you a bit of a recap, this was what you would expect to see when it comes to essay types that are tested. So you would see that you would be experiencing, personal recount essays. You would be expected to know how to write descriptively. You'll be expected to know how to explain your point through discursive essays and argue your stand through argumentative essays. And eventually we will touch on mixed genre essays, which is a combination of perhaps a personal recount and a discursive essay, or descriptive plus discursive essay. Okay, so at this moment we are going to focus a lot more on argumentative essays, just to sharpen your argument, to help you to find a stronger personal voice when you're writing, and this would help you to be a bit more persuasive when you're arguing for your stand. Okay, so after going through the lower sec syllabus, this is what you are expected to know. Now for lower sec, actually you have gone through argumentative writing already, but knowing lower sec, it can be a little bit more challenging for you to figure out some of these requirements, some of this writing structure. So we would like to recap some of these expectations so that you are a bit more confident and you have a bit more methods to actually write in a way that is engaging to your audience. Alright, so at the end of secondary 2, you are really expected to know the structure of argumentative essays, and you are also expected to know how to write a thesis statement that is convincing, that's impactful in your introduction, and you are also expected to write a counter argument as well as a rebuttal paragraph. So moving forward, what are we going to do at secondary 3 and 4 is that we are going to work on what you already know, which is all of these over here. And what we would do is we would be sharpening your writing technique. So what do I mean by that is that we are going to teach you how to write it in a more impactful way, such that your thesis statement is very precise. It doesn't feel very long-winded, that you're beating around the bush and you are not being concise enough. Okay, so we're trying to help you to be more impactful as a writer. We want to help you to sharpen your argument such that you are more persuasive. Okay, people can't poke holes in the logic of your argument, and we'll teach you two other types of writing techniques here. So one is a dependent factors approach and one is a dualism approach. But for today, we are looking a little bit more on the point of view approach, which is what we've been looking at so far when we talk about the perspectives that we have. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some examples from the argumentative essays first. So these are just some questions over here, and I think sometimes students are not very sure whether it is a discursive essay or whether it is an argumentative essay. So a rule of thumb is you identify if the statement given to you or the question given to you has a perspective that is leaning towards. Okay, so it can come across as a very biased statement. It has a statement where it's kind of forcing you to agree with their point of view, or makes you feel that you have to disagree very strongly with some of the leading terms within the question. So the first example over here, it says, should teenagers be banned from online gaming? Alright, so the fact that it's asking you should, it's asking you to make a stand. Okay, and this term here, banned, is pretty firm as well. Alright, it's not saying that teenagers should be discouraged, or teenagers should be should reduce, for example. So this term is a pretty strong term. It is not, for instance, discourage. It is not, for instance, reduce their usage of online gaming. You know, it's a pretty strong term, and by asking you whether you should or should not do it, they're really asking for your stand. So this here would make it quite clearly an argumentative essay. Okay, then for the next one, of course, for this question, it may seem like it is a discursive essay, but take a look at this. It says that the internet has done more harm than good. So the fact that it's asking you to agree or disagree based on this, whether or not it has the harms outweigh the benefits, right? So this here requires you to agree with it, to say yes, it is more damaging than it is beneficial, or the other way around. So while this sounds deceptively neutral, it is not exactly being neutral. You have to take a stand. Alright, you have to take a stand to agree with the statement or disagree with the statement. So for this question, because of the way the question is leaning towards, you need a stand. And when a stand is needed, a clear stand is needed, then it's an argumentative essay. Okay, the last one here is actually an actual question from the O level. Okay, take a look at the statement that's given. Does it sound a little bit there's a value judgment in it, right? So which words here shows you that there's a little bit of judgment, of bias, of certain strong perspective coming through from this sentence itself, right? So often said, too concerned, and what are they concerned about? Getting things and spending money. Alright, so is this something that we want to encourage, or does this sound like something that we want to discourage? Right, there's a kind of a negative value judgment over here, right? So because this here, there is already this judgment within the statement, we know that this is no longer a neutral question. They're asking you for your stand, for your opinion. Therefore, this is more of an argumentative essay. Alright, so if this part is not so clear, you want to clarify further, please approach me and to find out a bit more. Okay, so hopefully this would help you to be able to interpret the questions a little bit more carefully. And if I'm going too quickly, you can always pause and you can always listen to this portion over again. Alright, so for the point of view approach, this approach is a bit more straightforward, where you pick one point of view and you stick to that point of view. So for instance, if you agree, you stick to this point of view for paragraph 2, 3, and 4. This is optional if you have additional point. And then very importantly, a crucial aspect of an argumentative essay is to raise the counterpoint and to give a solid rebuttal. Okay, so that strengthens your argument and then you conclude it. Right, so a point of view approach, do take note of this. This is how we would advise you to write your essay such that it is more persuasive. Now, in order for us to start an essay well, we have to ensure that our introduction is eye-catching. So how do you ensure that your introduction packs a punch? How do you ensure that it hits the right spot? It is something that leads the reader to agree very readily with you and anticipate some of the points that you have to bring across. Right? So I'm sure you're familiar with this acronym already, so it should hit the spot, right? So it should have a hook, an interpretation, as well as a thesis. So this here, you are very familiar with the different ways of starting a paragraph, but oftentimes students do not quite practice writing the introduction enough, such that every time when they are required to start an introduction during in a time sensitive setting, they often struggle to write something that is very convincing. Alright, so as you practice writing this on your own during your spare time, don't only practice writing the body paragraphs, also focus a little bit more on crafting a very convincing introduction. Okay, so this definitely needs practice, and the more you practice, the more comfortable it comes to you, and it takes you a little bit less effort to think of ways to put together a very impactful introduction. So this definitely needs a lot of training. So the earlier you start practicing, especially in secondary 3, that would make it a lot more manageable by the time you reach secondary 4. Now in your booklet, you have the samples already. I will just elaborate on them a little bit more so that you know how to use these different techniques to your advantage. So the very first one that you see here, the first technique here, is that you can use a quotation. Now this quotation best is if you are able to quote someone who is credible. Okay, so if you were to reference your neighbor, the person's credibility may not be that so may not be so strong, so it may not be the most persuasive person, right? The most impactful person you would like to quote, right? So when you are quoting, make sure that it is relevant. Don't put in a quote for the sake of a quote, okay? And don't make up quotes either, because it's very easy to verify the authenticity of the quote. Alright, so this can be used in a variety of ways. So one way you can do so is you can think about perhaps a very well-known person in the country, and you can look up for quotations and you can copy down, you can make a quotation bank. So for instance, if I want to describe youth, right? So I want to describe youth in Singapore. So the person that I will look out for and try to find any useful quotations is likely from the Prime Minister. That's an example. So I can Google Prime Minister of Singapore Lawrence Wong youth quotation and see what comes up, right? And then I can keep that in my bank. Okay, so that would lend credibility to my argument. The next one. Now, for us who are not so familiar with quotations from different characters, different famous people, we may want to fall back on a simple anecdote. So an anecdote basically is a short story, and when I say short story, I mean that it should not be a very lengthy one that takes up half the introduction, half the page. So this should just be a 2 to 3 line, a very succinct anecdote, very succinct short story that brings your point across. And this here is important. It's not there just to fill up space, it's there to illustrate the point that you want to make. So for instance, if you're talking about the context of technology and education, so you can share about your own personal experience, right? How being a digital native, you cannot imagine a classroom without any use of technology. Once you enter the classroom, you are required to refer to the projector. When you do project, you are able to collaborate online. So illustrate this using concrete, tangible things that you have experienced. So that would make it a lot more persuasive. Okay, now the next one would be a rhetorical question. So a rhetorical question is a thought-provoking question, something that after you had asked it, the person is inclined to agree with you. Okay, so a rhetorical question is something you asked whereby the reader is inclined to agree. Okay, so very, very importantly, don't repeat the essay question that's given and assume that it is a thought-provoking or is an impactful rhetorical question. Oftentimes it's very boring. So if you start off the paragraph by saying, do you think that technology and education is necessary? I'm sorry, that's a very, very boring question. You can expect a lot of Singaporean students to be writing something like that, thinking that they have given a very deep rhetorical question. Not quite. Okay, so previously I had shared with you about probing question, right? A very thought-provoking question. So that's something you can consider. Okay, so a probing question in this aspect here would be technology and education. So one way you can do so is you can get them to kind of think how it would be like without technology. So this is an example of that. Okay, or alternatively, you can set up an anecdote. You can say that my mom once shared with me that when she was a student, if they would like to conduct research, they are required to go to the library, look for the encyclopedia, and reference information from the encyclopedia. That's an anecdote, right? You can add a rhetorical question after that. Can you believe it? How archaic that is? Question mark. Right? Then that would stand out as a rhetorical question. Okay, so you hook the person by giving them a scenario that they can imagine, and then you emphasize it with the use of a rhetorical question. That way it can add the impact. Okay, so this is one way you can do so. So a rhetorical question, if you can, you shouldn't write a very lengthy, very convoluted kind of rhetorical question. So when you want your sentence to have impact, best is if the question is short. Okay, short sentences. So like what I have given you just now as an example, can you imagine how archaic that is? short one, less than 10 words. Okay, so that way you are giving a thought-provoking question. You don't tax the reader's working memory so much by trying to figure out what exactly you're trying to say. So if you want something impactful, you want a short sentence to hammer home the point. Alright, now the easiest way is to provide a general observation. Okay, but the issue with giving a general observation throughout your essay is that it can be very bland. Okay, so you can use this, but sparingly. Try to add in other forms of technique to kind of capture the attention of your reader and to sustain the interest of your reader. Right, so this is a general observation. You can see the differences in the introductions. They are quite diverse, and they're quite different in the way that they engage the audience. And the last one, if you still remember a lot of your sensorial descriptions for primary school, during PSLE, I'm sure you have memorized many different ways to describe the surroundings around you, what you observe, what you see, what you smell, what you touch, and so on. So this year, we keep it short, okay? If you recall, when we write a speech, we want to keep it engaging, keep it impactful. Remember our rule of 3. Okay, so we don't overdo it, we just hit the right impact and then we carry on. Okay, so this is the sound that we can hear. Okay, this one you can imagine it being touched or being something you can see. This one is another observation that you can see, pretty fast, something that you can experience. So you see it's very short, some short descriptions, and that's good enough. Alright, so like I said, a good introduction should have these two aspects, right? A hook with the interpretation, and now the issue that we have is the thesis that sometimes students are not so good at providing. Okay, so the next few portions over here, unfortunately, I'm not sure with what's the issue with the printing. I'm not sure it was if it was deliberately left out or what, but I would highly recommend that you just take a screenshot, or if you find that you internalize information a lot easier by writing down notes, please go ahead and do so, which is why I have put this as a video anyway, so that it allows you to return to this piece of notes here again and again. Okay, so when we talk about giving interpretations, meaningful interpretations, we are not asking you to give textbooks definitions or definition from the encyclopedia, none of that. So as long as you can have some basic understanding of the keywords or of the context of the issue, you can write about that. Okay, now for this here, for instance, take a look at this sample. It says here, the use of technology in the education is necessary. See the way they have tried to put together the different components of an impactful introduction. Okay, so here you can see that you can start off with a rhetorical question here. Okay, and then these here can be some interpretation. Sorry, this is more of a thesis, I would say. Then this here, you can see this is the interpretation of technology. So what are some examples of technology in the classroom? Technology in education, Google Classroom, YouTube, Pear Deck, and so on. Now I've highlighted this word over here. If you can, when you're writing in the introduction, it's good for you to use more sophisticated vocabulary. So changed over here, you know that there's a difference, but you may not be able to see the extent of the difference. So if you can add an an adverb to further emphasize how drastic or how significant the change is, it would be even better. So a better way to describe this would be perhaps significantly changed. It will sound different, right, if you see that you have added this adverb. Alright? Or if you can substitute significantly changed with one word that shows this significant change, that would be even better. So this will be a good word to keep in your vocab bank. Revolutionize. Okay, so it's such a drastic change that it is like a paradigm shift. So this here would be an adjective that basically means this here. Okay, but you have to use this in the correct context. Okay, so make sure that it is really groundbreaking, right? So revolutionize, you can say groundbreaking change. This is another adverb. It has to be in the correct context. Okay, so you can't say that, not wearing spectacles has been a revolution to my life. You will have to spend a little bit of time justifying how is that revolutionary. Okay, so please use sophisticated words in the right context, otherwise you'll be penalized for inappropriate usage of word choices. Okay, and it will backfire. So make sure that you use it judiciously and you use it in the correct context. Okay, so just a little bit more from here to show you what is not in your textbook but it will be useful for you to take note of, is that when you write a thesis, many times students do not know how to craft a meaningful thesis. What do I mean by that? Now, sometimes students tend to write statements like these, and I want to emphasize that these are not thesis statements. Okay, these are more like signposts. Signpost here says that you are trying to show your reader that, hey, I'm going on to talk about something else. Okay, and in a written piece of work, you don't really need to show this kind of signposting. You can use this in speech, because in speech I rely a lot on signposting words to figure out where you are going next. It's a lot more taxing to just be listening and to figuring out what your main point is. So you are to use signposts judiciously, use a lot of it when you are speaking. But when you are writing, the reader can easily go back and forth. So you don't need to put so many signposts such that it does you a bit redundant, or the pacing or the rhythm is a bit slower. Okay, so these here I want to strongly emphasize, you don't use this in argumentative writing, you don't use this in discursive writing. You may write this in a speech, but I would suggest that you do not use that. You cut straight to the point. And the most important takeaway is that this is not a thesis statement. Okay, so when you write this, these are not helpful statements to include in your paragraph, in your introduction. Please do not include that. Okay, so now what is a thesis statement, right? So if I'm not allowed to write the few sentences above, then what am I supposed to write? So your thesis statement is something whereby you are required to state your position, state reasons why you agree or disagree. Basically, if I think that you are rambling for a long period of time in your introduction, if I read your thesis statement, I know what is your main stand. Okay, your thesis statement is meant to summarize your stand such that when someone is confused by what you're trying to say, at the very least, they know your stand. Okay, so a good thesis statement that is clear, that is concise, that is explicit is very helpful. So here is another example, unfortunately not in your booklet. I strongly recommend that you screenshot these or you take note of it somehow, so you can have some sample to make comparisons when you're revising. Okay, take a look at this particular paragraph. What do you think is the main point of view, right? What do you think is the person's perspective throughout the whole essay? Okay, so this question is asking, right, is this necessary? Do we really need technology in education? And this person says in the thesis statement, okay, well, number one, it can be a distraction. Okay, but the person says, while it can be a distraction, it should remain as a permanent feature. So you can tell that this person agrees. Yes, it's necessary. Okay, and it's further justified by using these. And these can subsequently form your paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, for example, in the body paragraph. Okay, so you can show this here. You can write your thesis statement in such a manner. Okay, so At this point here, it's been 25 minutes. I hope that this has been meaningful. I hope you have taken down notes. If there are things to clarify in class, please do so. And please head on to the next part of the next video, okay? I'm gonna pause this. I'm gonna end this video here so that it doesn't take so long to upload this particular video. Alright, so hope this has been helpful to you.